I'll apologize in advance for any wind noise in this video. It's a blustery, overcast day here in Sausalito, California, but I'm excited because I have finally gotten my hands on the 2022 Ford Mustang Mach-E GT. Now, not everybody is happy with the Mustang title, but I suspect that there are more than a few people out there that may change their mind if they get behind the wheel of the GT model. With 480 horsepower, 600 pound-feet of torque standard, and over 600 pound-feet if you get the performance model, which is what we're taking a look at first. If you didn't already know it, there are a number of Mach-E videos on the channel. You may want to check them out after you've watched this video, because we do have a Mach-E for a long-term vehicle here at Alex Autos. We'll keep it through the end of calendar year 2021. We'll be doing a number of videos on Blue Cruise and a bunch of other features coming soon. And then we're going to sell it and get something different. But if you've watched those videos, then you'll notice that the Mach-E GT looks very similar. We have full LED headlights up front. We have a slightly different treatment down here at the bottom of the bumper with a bigger splitter, still active grille shutters here. And the most prominent feature is that we get more of a grille than we find in the regular model. In the regular model, there's sort of a handlebar mustache theme going on there. In this one, we get more of a 3D grille insert, although none of this is used for cooling. It's just a blanked out portion. Electric Pony logo right there in the middle, and then functional vents on either side. The GT treatment doesn't change the vehicle's exterior dimensions, so this is still 186 inches long, putting this between the Escape and the Edge. This is 6 inches longer than the Escape, 2 inches shorter than the Edge. One interesting twist is that it does get a little bit lower if you get the GT badge versus the rest of the Mach-E lineup, but it's not a big difference. It's 0.4 of an inch, and that means that any way you slice it, this actually has less ground clearance than a regular two-door Mustang. So whether you want to call this the Mustang 4-door sedan, the Mustang Sportback, or the Mustang crossover, I will leave that entirely up to you. Or whether you think that the Mustang name is an absolute abomination, you could just call it a Mach-E because, of course, it has a Mach-E logo right there on the door. Maybe it's because I don't own a classic Mustang, but personally, I'm not too offended by the Mustang name being applied to this vehicle. And Ford has done a bit of work to try and style this like a Mustang. We have the long hood profile up front, with the front trunk area there, and then they've really tried to style the body to carry over the Sportback-like styling there, while actually giving us some practical cargo room with the roofline in black, maintaining more of a horizontal line. Be sure and let me know what you think about the wheels on the base GT model. It has some aero covers on it, which can be removed. I think it looks a lot more attractive without the aero covers, but this wheel, I think, is definitely the most attractive one that I've ever seen on a Mach-E. As with the rest of the Mach-E lineup, we still have these teeny tiny little door handles up front and power doors, so press that little button right there, the door power pops open. It has anti-pinch protection, so you do have to open it and then close it again. And then the rear doors have no little vestigial handle like we find up front. The lack of a rear door handle is my only major complaint with my Mach-E. You press the button, door pops open, we have the same sort of anti-pinch protection there. There's a rubber strip right down there and you grab the door and then open it. However, I have noticed some fine scratching starting to appear right there on the trailing edge of the rear doors. Moving to the back, we find a little bit less differentiation than we have up front versus the rest of the Mach-E lineup. We have a GT logo right there. That's the big way you'll tell the difference. Still have the sequential turn signals that we find in the rest of the lineup, LED tail lamps there, and a bit of a change to the diffuser at the bottom of the bumper. No Mustang GT would be complete without a ton of power, so of course we find that in the Mach-E GT as well. 480 horsepower is standard, 600 pound-feet of torque is what you find in the base GT model. That bumps up to 634 pound-feet of torque if you get the performance package. But more importantly than the actual horsepower and torque figures is the fact that if you get the performance package model, it will dial the power up more rapidly. And that's the big thing that we see in performance EVs. It's not necessarily the peak torque and peak horsepower, but how quickly the vehicle will go from 0 to 100% of battery and motor output. If you get the regular Mach-E GT, this will go from 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds. If you get the GT with the performance package, it drops that down to 3.5, and you will certainly notice some wheel spin when that is happening. Part of that is the massive amount of torque that we have from these electric motors. We now have the same electric motor in the rear and in the front. Interesting twist, this is actually the same rear electric motor that we find in the dual motor long-range big battery pack version of the regular Mach-E, except that in the GT they put the same motor that's in the back up front as well. The battery pack is essentially the same. It's a 98.8 kilowatt hour nominal battery pack, but for 2022 we have access to a bit more of it. Previously, 88 kilowatt hours was usable. For 2022, that's bumped up to 91 kilowatt hours. And that's likely the main reason that the 2022 GT has the same range as the long-range dual-motor version, even though this has wider 245 width tires on it, because we have access to a little bit more power. That model was rated for 270 miles in 2021. It's also going to be getting a bump to 91 kilowatt hours usable, and all 2021 models will also get that update a little bit later. So in real-world driving, you might get 280 miles in that model, 270 miles in the regular GT, and in this performance pack version, thanks to the summer tires, 260 miles. Charging happens behind door number 1 on the driver's side. There's an onboard 10.5 kilowatt AC charger. That's the same one as before. DC fast charging has been improved a little bit. It will still peak out at around 159 kilowatts for a brief time. It will then plateau right around 120 to 112 kilowatts, depending on exactly how charged the battery is. But after 80%, Ford is promising that this will charge considerably faster than before. With the 2021 model year vehicle, Ford was incredibly conservative, and they just really sharply cut off that charge rate, and after 80%, it was only charging at around 12 kW. For 2022, I don't know exactly what that number will be, but they're promising that it will be better. And yes, that update is also going to apply to 2021 model year vehicles, so if you're planning on going from 10% to 90%, this should go faster than before. If you plug into the right CCS charger, going from 10% to 80% battery capacity, it should take around 40 minutes with this vehicle. That is a little bit slower than something like a Tesla Model Y. However, because this has a bigger battery pack and a longer real-world range than most versions of the Model Y, going from, say, San Francisco to Los Angeles is actually going to take a little less time in this, because you're likely only going to have to stop to charge once, and in the Model Y, you may have to stop twice. Because the Mach-E has more of a sportback or a liftback design than a traditional crossover hatchback, you will certainly find more cargo room in something like a Ford Edge. Behind here, we have just under 30 cubic feet of storage space, which is certainly enough room for about 4 or 5 24-inch roller bags. Again, check out my full review on the regular Mach-E for more details about cargo, interior space, etc. This is a pretty big and pretty accommodating cargo area. You can fit just about the same number of bags in here as you can in a Model Y, but the Mach-E has an interesting trick up its sleeve. The Mach-E not only has a front trunk, it has one of the larger front trunks available. You can see this 22-inch roller bag fits quite easily in here, and you can also fit a 24-inch roller bag in here, because the hood actually gives you about 3 inches of additional luggage room. So rather surprisingly, I was able to fit one more bag in here than in something like the Volkswagen ID.4, just due to the shape of the insides. This front trunk also gets a bit of an update for 2022. If I pull this bag out, there is no longer a cargo divider in here. There's still a drain in the bottom, so you can use this area as a cooler. There are also some cup holder cutouts there. The electric release hatch for the hood now functions, and you can open the front trunk either from the touchscreen infotainment system with the press of a button, or from the app on your smartphone. Unfortunately, the key fob that comes with the Mach-E does not change. You only get one of these, and there's no front trunk button on it. So if you'd rather use a key fob like this rather than the remote on your smartphone, you have to open that trunk manually, or use the button on the infotainment system after you've started the car. If you prefer more of a traditional hood release, don't worry, there's one over here in the driver's side footwell also. Ford gives us 2 different front seat designs depending on the trim level you get. If you get the base GT model, then the front seats look very similar to the rest of the Mach-E lineup. The stitching is a little bit different and the upholstery is a little bit different, but the design of the seat is quite similar. If you get the performance package option, then we get improved bolstering on the seat bottom cushion, seat back cushion, and the shoulder area. You'll see that in a bit. But the power mechanism remains the same. The seat bottom does not independently adjust for tilt, so it simply goes up and down and adjusts for tilt while it does. And we have a 2-way adjustable lumbar support. For the price tag on especially the performance package model, I would really have loved to see an improved driver's seat design, especially with 4-way lumbar, perhaps inflatable bolsters or extending thigh cushions. The steering wheel is still a manual tilt telescopic design with a large range of motion. Jumping into the back, we find the same kind of legroom that we find in the non-GT model. There's a flat floor, rear air conditioning vents, lots of headroom back here. This model has the optional glass roof. You can get a GT with a steel roof if you want to, but you're going to reduce the headroom just a little bit. Although not strictly part of the back seat, I do find the hard plastics on the back of the front seat back a little bit less premium feeling than the ones that we find in the rest of the Mach-E lineup. Now let's look around the interior of the model with the performance package, then we'll take a look at the model without it. We have that large panoramic moonroof right there over the driver and front passengers' heads. It goes to just about the rear passengers' laps, but not quite their heads. The seat upholstery gets some unique design touches front and rear. It's really obvious with the light on this camera that we have sort of white inserts right there. It actually is a perforated Alcantara-like fabric, but it really glows really brightly with the light on that seat. We also have some cross hatches in the fabric. You can see a little bit more easily right here up front. Imitation leather, very aggressive shoulder bolstering right there. This is kind of a unique design to the seat. Let me know what you think about it. Height adjustable shoulder belts, but fixed in place headrests in this particular design. That imitation suede center section right there, continuing on the seat bottom, but the seats are not ventilated, they are just heated. As we see in the regular Mach-E, there are a lot of premium materials, but they definitely change for the GT trim. So we get the imitation suede insert in the door rather than imitation leather, soft touch material stitched there, fabric cover for the speaker grille, some hard plastics down there around the bottle holder, soft touch plastics at the top of the door, and then more of that material going on the dashboard. So fabric right there covering the speaker grills, air vents there, combination of some imitation knurled metal trim, and then the imitation suede just below that, wrapping around the dashboard. The same big touchscreen infotainment system with some important software tweaks for 2021. The interior design is largely the same as the regular Mach-E, but we definitely get some different materials. We have a suede insert right there on the doors, along with some of the imitation leather parts, and then fabric components right there over the speaker grills, but the shapes are all basically the same as the rest of the Mach-E lineup. That continues on the dashboard, where we find a combination fabric upper, suede lower right there, and then imitation metal trim right between those air vents. In the middle, we have the same big screen infotainment system that we saw before, but there's some important software tweaks for 2022. The first thing you'll notice is that CarPlay is now supported in this portrait mode, in addition to the compressed, more traditional landscape mode. And you can switch back and forth between the two, which is a really cool feature. I haven't seen any system that does this just yet. Below we have some widgets that can be expanded, so factory navigation right there, owner's manual, media interface. You can also get things like your trip computer, phone interface, things like that. These widgets can also be expanded. So for instance, if I'm here taking a look at the trip computer information, I can hit that button, expand the information, get some additional details out right there. Other changes you'll notice, if I go over to the settings menu and I engage unbridled, we now have an unbridled extend mode that's going to improve cooling for the battery and give you better performance out on a track or out on an autocross. One quick clarification on the unbridled extend option, which again is unique to the GT trims. You won't find it on the regular dual motor versions of the Mach-E. Ford has said that they've designed this system to give you repeatable performance on small tracks or on autocross style courses. It's sort of for the weekend warrior type person. It actually reduces your 0 to 60 time because it limits peak power in order to give the Mach-E more of a rear power bias. So when you engage the unbridled extend mode, it's going to tweak the way the traction control, stability control system function, the all-wheel drive system, the cooling of the battery pack, etc., to optimize repeatable performance on a track, not necessarily absolute peak performance. Under the access menu, we have the option to open the front trunk or open the rear trunk electronically in here. I wish that was more of a shortcut up top. There's an engine start-stop button right over there to the left of the screen. Under it, we have two USB ports. Those both work with the system, so you can choose wireless CarPlay or wired CarPlay. I like that they give us a choice there. There's also a Qi wireless charging mat, two big cup holders, a storage area right there under that center console. Same shifter that we find in the rest of the lineup. It's a rotary dial shifter there with low. Low engages more aggressive regen braking. You can also enable one pedal drive if that's something that you're interested in. Automated parking system there, and then a big GT logo right there on the center armrest that opens to reveal a large storage area with a roller cover. Over on the driver's side, we have the same basic steering wheel design with some slight tweaks to the leather wrapping. You'll notice the flashing lights right there. That's part of the driver monitoring system for Blue Cruise. The GT models will all have Blue Cruise on them. Hopefully that software is coming to the rest of the Mach-E lineup later, like the one that I have. We don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but these are going to launch with it. The instrument cluster also has another slight tweak. It now has a power and charge gauge right over here just under the battery level to give you a better idea of exactly what the system is doing. I like the fact that Ford has wrapped fabric all around the dashboard. I also love the fact that they've given us this slim little LCD right here. I think it's a lot more convenient to have some features right there in easy view of the driver and then separate features right there in the infotainment screen. If you're looking for an EV with a few more buttons, you'll definitely like the interior here. We have 3-position memory over there on the driver's door, but one thing that I do wish we had was a button over here for the trunk and a button for the frunk that was a little bit more easily accessible. Now let's talk about how the Mach-E GT drives. I'm on a curvy bit of road right here in a corner, and that's important because this does have a dual electric motor setup. Again, basically what Ford did was they took the electric motor from the rear of the long-range dual motor version that I have, and they jammed that up front as well. That gives us symmetrical power abilities. Now, obviously the software can direct power around wherever it wants to, so it could max out the front motor and not send anything to the rear if it needed to, if there was wheel slip. It could max out the rear and not send much to the front. But when you want maximum acceleration, it is basically sending as much power to either axle as possible. And that means that you do get a little bit of torque steer, which is interesting. But again, also something that you see in other dual motor electric vehicles. And that is absolutely necessary. And you will find the same sort of feel in something like a Tesla performance model, because in order to get those absolutely insane 0 to 60 times, this model under 4 seconds, 3.8 seconds for this model, you have to send a lot of power to the front axle, and that simply means that you're going to get some of those same sort of pulling motions that you get in other vehicles with a lot of power on the front axle. As far as 0 to 60 goes, you will definitely find some faster Tesla models, but it's important to remember two things. The first one, they're going to cost more, and the second one, they're not going to have quite the same kind of real-world range that we find in this vehicle. Part of the reason that this isn't sub 3 seconds is the weight of the battery pack. This has a truly massive battery in it. It is nearly 100 kilowatt hours. The battery pack in this is nearly the same size, practically the same size actually, it's only a few tenths of a kilowatt hour less than the one that we find in the 3-row Tesla Model X. The other thing to keep in mind though is that battery pack is pretty big and pretty heavy, and we have 245 width tires on this model. If you get a Tesla Model Y Performance, we get pretty wide tires, 255s up front, 275s in the back. There is just a lot more tire going on in that Tesla. And as I've noted in my own Mustang, that does mean this feels a little bit under-tired at times. Now, the suspension itself has been changed, and I think that actually the way this suspension feels is a little bit more sorted than the one in the regular dual-motor Mach-E. They're both firm and bouncy, and that's just the way that big battery EVs tend to be. Remember, the curb weight on this is over 5,000 pounds. This weighs about as much as a V8 3-row Dodge Durango, and this is a relatively small 2-row crossover. And that's all due to the battery pack. But because the vehicle is quite low, there's not as much suspension motion to damp the vehicle's motions. So we get exactly the same kind of ride quality that we see, honestly, in something like the Polestar 2, or a Tesla Model 3, or a Tesla Model Y, for exactly the same reasons in all of those vehicles. Even if this might give up a little bit of grip to the Model Y, it is definitely an awful lot of fun to drive out here. And let's go through some of the other things that I like. I like the fact that we have one-pedal driving if you like it. Personally, I don't. But we also have the ability to control the amount of regen braking outside of pure one-pedal driving. I can put this in drive mode, or I can put this in low to give even more regen. I can move over here to the whisper drive mode, and if I'm in drive, I get very little regen braking. That's personally my preference. And the reason for that is it's generally more efficient to coast and then command regen when you want it. So in this whisper mode, I can just tootle down this road very calmly, make sure that I'm really drawing out those stops, eke all the range that I want out of the vehicle, and this has a blended braking system, unlike modern Teslas. So if I put my foot on the brake pedal, this is when I get regen braking to put power back in the battery. And in a Tesla, throttle liftoff regen is all you get. So if you have the vehicle in chill mode, or whatever they're currently calling their lowest regen mode, then you are leaving electrons on the table if you press the brake pedal. But that's not the case in the Mach-E. I've now hopped into a GT with the performance package on it, and you will definitely notice the upgraded tires immediately. These tires give the vehicle more grip, it feels a little bit more confident, and they don't squeal around the corners like you can in the regular Mach-E GT. Now keep in mind that even though the wheels are different, the tires remain the same size. So these are still 245/45 R20s. So you could get a very similar level of handling competency in the base Mach-E GT if you were to upgrade the tires, but you would not get the adaptive variable suspension system that we find in this model. This uses a Magna-Ride suspension system, but what's interesting is it's not independently configurable from the drive mode. So if I go over here to the main screen, select, say, Whisper, this is going to be the most comfortable drive mode in this vehicle. And in this mode, I actually think this is the best riding Mach-E that is on sale. This definitely feels more compliant over potholes in this really badly paved road here than the Mach-E that I own, which is again the long-range model. If I put the vehicle into engage mode, it feels an awful lot like the base version of the Mach-E GT, and again, not far off where we see the long-range dual-motor version. If I put it in unbridled, you can sort of think of that as Sport Plus. Things definitely get a little bit more firm, but not as harsh as I actually suspected they would be, so this is still a pretty comfortable suspension tune. If I come to a complete stop and then romp on the throttle, you will definitely notice the difference between this and the base version of the GT. This is definitely a lot quicker from, say, 0 to 30. And that, again, is not because of the total amount of power or the total amount of torque being vastly different. It's that this vehicle will give you more immediate torque and more immediate power than in the base version of the GT. The responsiveness is definitely noticeable. And thanks to the grippier tires, we don't get the same kind of mild torque steer that you can get in the regular GT version. Now, if you are beating on this a little bit harder, you'll notice that the power will slowly derate over time, but the power gauge will tell you when you can have maximum and when you can't have maximum power out of the vehicle. When it comes to range, you're probably not going to notice much of a real-world difference between the GT Performance, the GT, and the regular dual-motor all-wheel drive version with the long-range battery pack. The variance is mainly due to the tire and wheel change, but also a motor change up front. I suspect that in the real world, you're going to notice about a 10-mile difference between the regular all-wheel drive Mach-E with the big battery, the GT, and then another 10 miles of real-world range with this one here. But 260 is still definitely a very realistic number. This has a big battery pack, and Ford isn't playing the same sort of game that Tesla does with their EPA ratings. So keep in mind, this 260 miles is going to be a little bit more rational, a little bit more real world, with the caveat that if you live in a cold area of the country, you may see a steeper decline in here, because the Model Y does use a heat pump, as do some other luxury EVs, and this uses a resistive element heater. If you're buying a Mach-E in a mild climate, say out here in California, where honestly I rarely use the heater at all, then you're going to notice more real-world range in this than a comparable Model Y. But if you live in Detroit, you may notice more range in the Model Y. Unfortunately, I have not been able to do any instrumented testing with this or the base Mach-E GT. Hopefully I'll be able to do that soon, but you can definitely bet that the performance version, thanks to everything that's been upgraded on this, is going to stop the shortest in the Mustang Mach-E lineup. It's not likely to stop as short as a regular two-door Mustang GT, but it definitely is heaps of fun. And you know what, this is going to sound sacrilegious, I know, but to be honest, I think this is a little bit more fun than a regular Mustang. It's not going to have the same kind of rear-wheel drive dynamics that you might be expecting. This is never going to do perfect snow donuts like you'd find in a rear-wheel drive vehicle like a Mustang GT, but the immediacy of the power is just so much fun out on a road like this. It's not going around the corner super fast like you could in something else with grippier tires or wider tires. Say a Model Y might go around some of these corners a little bit faster, but when you exit the corner, this just exits with so much thrust and so much eagerness and enthusiasm that it is honestly just as much fun as any of the other high-performance EVs out there, and at a sticker price that's relatively reasonable. Now, of course, we need to talk about that reasonable part because there is a bit of nuance with the tax credits, so let's dive into that pricing now. The Mach-E is an interesting animal when it comes to the price tag, because the price tag of the base Mach-E is pretty reasonable. If you're looking for a relatively inexpensive EV after tax credit, the base model is excellent. If you want the dual motor system with the big battery pack, that's going to set you back about $55,800. This GT model is going to start at $59,995. If you want the performance package option, that's an extra $5,000. That definitely puts this in sticker price parity with something like the Tesla Model Y. But there's an important caveat. This still qualifies for the full $7,500 federal tax credit, and the Tesla Model Y does not. So effectively, if you qualify for that full tax credit, you have to have a minimum of $7,500 of federal tax liability, then this will be several $1,000s less expensive. Now, it's not going to handle quite like the Tesla Model Y, and it may not be quite as fast depending on the configuration that you're looking at, but factoring in that tax credit, I think the Mach-E is going to be a better value. I also like its more distinctive looks. I think that the front-end design of the Model Y is just a little bit peculiar to my eye. I like the rear-end design of it, but I also like the rear-end design of the Mach-E, and I think this is a little bit more attractive. I know that a lot of people love to hammer on Tesla and the build quality, but it goes without saying that the build quality on this is better than the Tesla Model Y. We also have a screen that's just about as big on the inside, but it gives you Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. We have an instrument cluster exactly where you'd expect it to be. So if you're looking for an EV that is fun to drive, distinctive looking, and has more typical car features, that's exactly why you'd want to get the Mach-E over the Model Y. Obviously, there are pros and cons to either vehicle, but if you want to know about that, you're going to have to wait until I can get my hands on one of these for a complete week and run it through my usual battery of tests and comparisons. But in this video, I'm going to answer the most important question is, do I wish I had waited for a Mach-E GT or a Mach-E GT with the performance package? I have to say no, because even as much fun as this is, it's $10,000 more than my Mach-E, and I'm just fine with the performance level that I find in my model. I do wish that I had the adaptive dampers that this yellow car has on it, because that is absolutely excellent. But is it worth the $10,000 upgrade over the model that I have? Personally, I wouldn't go quite that far, But if you're looking for something that is a whole lot faster than that regular dual motor version, that is obviously going to be the GT with the performance package. This is an incredible amount of fun. Spinning the front tires just a little bit from a standstill is an absolute hoot and a half in an EV. There are very few EVs that will do that. Most manufacturers try and tune things to be a little bit more tame, and it's clear that Ford decided to have a bit more fun with the Mach-E GT. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below, and stay tuned because hopefully I will have one of these for a full week coming up soon. I'll see all of you later.